I never thought a gravel road cutting through 70 acres of Montana wilderness would become the center of a legal war. But here I was, staring at construction equipment tearing up my property like it was public land. My name is Adam Baxter, and I own a private stretch of land outside Whitefish, Montana, that I inherited from my grandfather 5 years ago. The property includes a winding private road that connects to the main highway and provides the only vehicle access to a small lake on the far corner of my acreage. That lake had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could fish in peace and forget about the chaos of running my construction business in town. Everything changed when the Meadowbrook Pines Homeowners Association decided they wanted to develop the area around their neighborhood, which bordered the opposite side of the lake. The HOA president, a woman named Patricia Cunningham, had apparently decided that my private road was now community property, and she was not shy about making that clear. It started on a Tuesday morning in early April 2025. I had driven up to the property to check on some fence repairs when I spotted a massive excavator parked right in the middle of my road. Behind it sat 2 dump trucks, a bulldozer, and what looked like a portable office trailer. A group of workers in hard hats were milling around, drinking coffee and looking at blueprints spread across the hood of a pickup truck. I parked my truck and walked over, my boots crunching on the gravel. "Morning, fellas. Mind telling me what you are doing on my property?" One of the workers, a younger guy with a scraggly beard, looked up. "We are with Mountain View Construction. We are clearing the road for the HOA Lake Access Project." "Lake Access Project?" I felt my jaw tighten. "This is a private road. Who authorized you to be here?" The worker shrugged and pointed to a woman emerging from the trailer. She was probably in her mid-50s, with blonde highlights and the kind of confident stride that said she was used to getting her way. She wore pristine designer jeans and a blazer that looked completely out of place on a construction site. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone already defensive. "Yeah, you can help me by getting off my property. This is a private road and I did not give anyone permission to use it." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I am Patricia Cunningham, president of the Meadowbrook Pines HOA, and according to our records, this road has been a public easement since 1978. We are simply exercising the community's right to access the lake for recreational purposes." I felt a cold anger settling in my chest. "Your records are wrong. My grandfather owned this land, and I have the deed that proves this road is private property. There is no easement." Patricia pulled out her phone and scrolled through something. "Well, our legal team disagrees. We filed the necessary permits with the county, and everything is in order. We are developing a public access point to the lake, complete with a boat launch and parking area. It is going to be wonderful for property values." "Not on my land, you are not." I kept my voice level, but my hands were clenched at my sides. She gave me a patronizing look. "Sir, I understand change can be difficult, but this is happening whether you like it or not. The county has already approved our plans. If you have an issue, you are welcome to file a complaint, but I assure you it will not change anything." I turned and walked back to my truck, pulling out my phone. The first call was to my lawyer, Marcus Green, who had handled my grandfather's estate. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Marcus, I need you to pull every document related to my Montana property. The HOA next door is claiming there is a public easement on my private road, and they have construction equipment all over it." There was a pause. "Adam, I reviewed those documents when you inherited. There is no easement on that road. Your grandfather was very careful about that. He even had it surveyed and recorded in 1982 specifically to prevent this kind of thing." "That is what I thought. Can you get me copies of everything by tomorrow?" I will have them by this afternoon. And Adam, do not do anything rash. Let me handle this legally. I hung up and looked back at the construction site. Patricia was talking to the workers, gesturing toward the lake. She looked completely unconcerned, like she owned the place. That attitude was going to cost her. By 3 that afternoon, Marcus had emailed me scanned copies of the original deed, the 1982 survey, and a legal opinion he had drafted outlining my property rights. The documents were crystal clear. The road was private, there was no easement, and any use by outside parties without permission was trespassing. I printed everything out and drove back to the property. The workers had made significant progress, widening the road and clearing brush on both sides. They had also started grading an area near the lake for what looked like a parking lot. Patricia was still there, now sitting in a folding chair outside the trailer and talking on her phone. She looked up as I approached and held up one finger, signaling me to wait. I did not wait. "You need to stop work immediately," I said, holding up the documents. "This is the deed to my property, along with a survey that clearly shows this road is private. You are trespassing, and if you do not leave, I am calling the sheriff." She finished her call and stood up, taking the papers from my hand. She barely glanced at them before handing them back. "These are old documents. Property laws change. We have a county permit which supersedes your grandfather's outdated claim." "That is not how property law works, Patricia. You cannot just decide a private road is public because it is convenient for your HOA. She crossed her arms. "The county disagrees with you. We went through the proper channels. If you have a problem, take it up with them." I pulled out my phone and dialed the Flathead County Sheriff's office. Patricia's expression shifted slightly, but she did not move. When the dispatcher answered, I explained the situation and requested a deputy come out to address the trespassing. "They will tell you the same thing I am telling you," Patricia said. "We have every right to be here." The deputy, a middle-aged man named Officer Harris, arrived about 40 minutes later. I showed him the documents, explained the situation, and pointed out that the construction crew had no permission to be on my land. He took his time reviewing everything, then walked over to talk to Patricia. I could not hear their conversation, but I saw her showing him something on her phone. After about 10 minutes, Officer Harris came back over. "Mr. Baxter, the HOA is claiming they have a county permit that grants them access. I am not a lawyer, so I cannot make a determination about who is right. What I can tell you is that this is a civil matter, not a criminal one. You are going to need to resolve this through the courts. So you are not going to make them leave." He looked uncomfortable. "I cannot force them off the property if they have documentation showing county approval. My recommendation is to get a lawyer and file for an injunction. That will stop the work until a judge can sort it out." I watched him drive away, frustration boiling in my chest. Patricia had returned to her chair and was typing on her phone, completely unbothered. That evening, I called Marcus again. "They are not leaving, and the sheriff said it is a civil matter. What are my options?" "File for a temporary restraining order and an injunction. I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning. We will need to get in front of a judge as soon as possible. In the meantime, document everything. Take photos, videos, anything that shows what they are doing to your property." I spent the next morning doing exactly that. I walked the entire road, photographing the equipment, the cleared areas, and the damage they had already done. I also set up a trail camera near the lake to capture any additional work. Marcus filed the motion that afternoon, and we got a court date for the following week. In the meantime, the construction continued. Every day I drove out to the property and watched them tear up more of my land. Patricia was there most days, supervising and ignoring my presence. On the third day, I noticed something that made my blood boil. They had installed a large wooden sign near the lake that read, Meadowbrook Pines Community Lake Access, HOA members only. Below it was a list of rules, including no trespassing by non-members. I took a photo and sent it to Marcus with a message. They are claiming ownership now. His response was immediate. Perfect. That helps our case. Keep documenting. The court hearing was set for the following Wednesday in Kalispell. Marcus and I arrived early and took seats in the courtroom. Patricia showed up with her own lawyer, a sharply dressed man named Ronald Perez, who looked like he spent more time on a golf course than in a courtroom. Judge Ellen Morrison called the case, and Marcus stood to present our side. He methodically walked through the deed, the survey, and the history of the property. He showed photos of the construction work and the sign claiming HOA ownership. Your Honor, this is a clear case of trespassing and property damage. The defendant has no legal right to use this private road, and their actions have caused significant harm to my client's property. We are asking for an immediate injunction to halt all work and a ruling that confirms Mr. Baxter's ownership and property rights. Ronald Perez stood next, all confidence and dismissive gestures. Your Honor, the Meadowbrook Pines HOA acted in good faith based on county records that show a public easement. We obtained all necessary permits and have invested significant resources into this community improvement project. To halt the work now would cause undue financial hardship and deprive the community of access to a valuable recreational resource. Judge Morrison looked at the documents in front of her. Mr. Perez, do you have documentation showing this easement? He pulled out a folder. Yes, Your Honor. We have a county map from 1978 that shows this road as a public access route. Marcus stood again. Your Honor, that map is inaccurate and was corrected in 1982 when Mr. Baxter's grandfather had the property surveyed. The county records were updated at that time. If the defendants had conducted proper due diligence, they would have discovered this. The judge spent several minutes reviewing the documents from both sides. Finally, she looked up. Based on the evidence presented, it appears that Mr. Baxter has clear title to the property, including the road in question. The 1982 survey supersedes the 1978 map, and I see no evidence of a valid easement. I am granting the temporary injunction. All construction work must cease immediately pending a full trial on the merits. Patricia's face went red. She leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer, but he shook his head. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, the defendants are ordered to remove all equipment and materials from the property within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges. We walked out of the courthouse, and I felt like I could breathe for the first time in a week. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. That went better than expected. Now we wait for the trial date, but I am confident we will win. I drove back to the property that afternoon, half expecting the equipment to still be there. To my surprise, the workers were already packing up. Patricia was nowhere to be seen, but one of the construction supervisors stopped me as I walked over. Hey, just so you know, we did not realize this was a private property dispute. The HOA told us everything was cleared. We are just contractors trying to do a job. I nodded. I understand. No hard feelings toward you guys. This is between me and the HOA. By the end of the week, all the equipment was gone. The road was torn up, the brush had been cleared, and there was a half-finished parking area near the lake, but at least the work had stopped. I thought that would be the end of it, but Patricia Cunningham was not the type to give up easily. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the Meadowbrook Pines HOA threatening to sue me for obstruction of community development and demanding I pay for the costs they had incurred in the project so far, which they claimed was over $80,000. I forwarded the letter to Marcus, who called me later that day. "This is absurd. They are the ones who trespassed on your property. If anything, you should be suing them for damages. Let me draft a response." But Patricia was not done. Over the next month, I started receiving complaints from Meadowbrook Pines residents. They would drive up to my gate, where the private road began, and honk their horns, demanding access to the lake. Some left angry notes on my truck. One even called the sheriff to report that I was blocking a public road. Officer Harris came out again, looking tired. "Mr. Baxter, I know you are in the right here, but these people are not going to leave you alone. Do you have a no trespassing sign posted?" I did, but I realized it was not enough. That evening, I started researching gates. If the HOA wanted to keep pushing, I was going to make sure they could not get anywhere near my property. I contacted a metalwork company in Kalispell and ordered a custom steel gate, the kind you would see on a high-security facility. It was 12 feet wide, 8 feet tall, and built to withstand anything short of a tank. The installation took 2 days, and when it was done, I had a locked gate at the entrance to my private road with a very clear sign. "Private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted." The reaction was immediate. Within hours of the gate going up, Patricia was at the entrance, pounding on the steel and screaming into her phone. I watched from my truck, parked about 50 yards down the road. She called the sheriff again. This time, a different deputy showed up, a younger woman named Officer Martinez. I walked up to the gate and unlocked it, letting her through. "Mr. Baxter, I understand you recently installed this gate." "Yes, madam. It is my property and I have the right to control access." Patricia pushed forward. "This is outrageous. He is blocking community access to the lake." Officer Martinez held up a hand. "Madam, I have reviewed the case file. The judge issued an injunction confirming this is private property. Mr. Baxter has every right to install a gate. If you continue to harass him, I will have to issue a citation for disturbing the peace." Patricia's face went purple. "This is not over. You have not heard the last of this," she stormed off, and Officer Martinez gave me a sympathetic look. "You might want to consider a restraining order if she keeps this up." I thanked her and locked the gate behind her as she left. For a few days, things were quiet. Then the letters started. The Meadowbrook Pines HOA sent me legal threats almost daily. They claimed I was devaluing their properties, preventing emergency access, and violating some obscure county ordinance about road maintenance. Each letter was more ridiculous than the last, and Marcus dismissed them all. "They are grasping at straws," he said. "Just ignore it. The trial is scheduled for August. We will settle this once and for all." But in early June, something happened that changed everything. I was at my office in Whitefish when I got a call from a neighbor who lived near my Montana property. His name was Carl Jensen, an older guy who had a small cabin about a mile from my land. "Adam, you need to get out here. The HOA is back and they brought a locksmith." I grabbed my keys and drove out there as fast as I could. When I arrived, I found Patricia, her lawyer Ronald, and a man with a toolbox standing at my gate. The locksmith was drilling into the lock. I jumped out of my truck. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" Patricia turned to me with a smug smile. "We obtained a court order granting us emergency access to the lake. There was a medical incident involving one of our residents, and the paramedics needed to use this road. Since you refused to provide access, the judge granted us the right to remove the lock." I looked at Ronald. "Show me the order." He handed me a folded piece of paper. I scanned it quickly and my stomach dropped. It was an emergency order signed by a different judge, authorizing temporary access to the property for emergency services. This says emergency services, not the HOA, I said. And it is temporary, meaning one-time access. You do not have the right to remove my lock permanently. Patricia shrugged. The order does not specify. We are simply ensuring access in case of future emergencies. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus, putting him on speaker. He listened to the situation and asked me to read the order verbatim. After I finished, he said, "Adam, that order is specific to emergency services personnel, not the HOA. They are misrepresenting it. Tell them if they remove that lock, you will file charges for property destruction." I repeated what Marcus said, but Patricia just laughed. "Your lawyer is bluffing." The order is clear. The locksmith, who had been standing there awkwardly, spoke up. "Look, I do not want to be in the middle of a legal dispute. If there is a question about the order, I am not touching that lock." He packed up his tools and left. Patricia looked furious, but there was nothing she could do. She and Ronald got in their car and drove away without another word. That evening, I installed a second lock on the gate, this one with a hardened steel shackle that would require an angle grinder to remove. I also set up security cameras at the entrance, wired to send alerts to my phone whenever they detected motion. The cameras paid off a week later. At 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed with an alert. I opened the app and saw 2 figures at the gate, trying to cut the lock with bolt cutters. I called 911 and then drove out to the property. By the time I arrived, Officer Martinez was already there, her patrol car's lights flashing. She had 2 teenagers in handcuffs, and the bolt cutters were on the ground next to the gate. "Mr. Baxter, these 2 say they were hired by someone to remove your lock. They claim they were offered $200 each." I looked at the kids. They could not have been older than 17. "Who hired you?" One of them, a skinny kid with acne, looked terrified. "Some lady from the HOA. She said the lock was not supposed to be there and we would be doing the community a favor." Officer Martinez wrote down their statements and called their parents. As she was finishing up, I asked, "Can you confirm who hired them?" She nodded. "I will follow up." If an adult solicited minors to commit vandalism, that is a serious crime. The next day, Officer Martinez called me. We talked to the kids and their parents. They identified Patricia Cunningham as the person who hired them. I am issuing a citation for solicitation of property destruction. She will have to appear in court. I felt a grim satisfaction. Patricia had finally crossed a line that law enforcement could not ignore, but she was not done yet. A week later, Marcus called with news. "Adam, the HOA has filed a countersuit. They are claiming you damaged their reputation and caused financial harm by installing the gate. They are asking for $300,000 in damages." I sat down, feeling the weight of it. This is insane. They trespassed on my property and now they are suing me. "It is a nuisance suit designed to pressure you into settling. We will file a motion to dismiss, but it is going to drag out the legal process. I am sorry." The trial for the property dispute was set for mid-August, but with the countersuit, everything became more complicated. Marcus filed motions, the HOA responded, and the whole thing turned into a legal quagmire. In the meantime, Patricia's citation for soliciting the teenagers went to court. I attended the hearing, sitting in the back row. Patricia showed up with Ronald, who argued that it was a misunderstanding and that his client had simply asked the boys to check if the lock was legal. The judge was not buying it. "Mrs. Cunningham, you hired minors to vandalize private property. That is illegal, regardless of your justification. I am fining you $1,500 and ordering you to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Baxter's property unless you have explicit legal authorization." It was a small victory, but it felt good to see Patricia finally face consequences. The main trial began on August 18, 2025. The courtroom was packed with Meadowbrook Pines residents, all there to support their HOA president. I sat with Marcus at the plaintiff's table while Patricia and Ronald took their seats across from us. Judge Morrison presided again, and she started by reviewing the facts of the case. Marcus presented our evidence first, walking through the deed, the survey, and the history of the property. He called me to the stand, and I testified about my grandfather's ownership and the steps he had taken to ensure the road remained private. Mr. Baxter, can you explain why your grandfather was so adamant about maintaining the road as private property? I nodded. He grew up during the Depression, and he valued self-reliance and property rights. He bought this land in the 1960s with the dream of having a place where his family could escape the world. He did not want anyone telling him what he could or could not do with his own land. That is why he had it surveyed and legally documented in 1982. He wanted to make sure future generations would not have to fight for what was rightfully theirs. Ronald cross-examined me, trying to paint me as an unreasonable hermit who was blocking community access out of spite. Mr. Baxter, would it not be the neighborly thing to allow the HOA to use a small portion of your road for the benefit of dozens of families? I looked him in the eye. If someone wants to use my property, they ask permission. They do not show up with bulldozers and claim it is theirs. The HOA had plenty of opportunities to approach me respectfully, but instead they chose to trespass and then lie about their legal rights. The HOA's case fell apart quickly. Ronald tried to argue that the 1978 map showed a public easement, but Marcus presented county records proving the map had been corrected in 1982. He also called a surveyor who testified that the current boundaries were accurate and that there was no evidence of any easement. Patricia took the stand and made things worse for herself. She was defensive and combative, insisting that the HOA had acted in good faith and that I was the one causing problems. Mrs. Cunningham, Marcus said during cross-examination, did you attempt to verify the existence of an easement before beginning construction? She hesitated. We relied on the county map. Did you hire a surveyor? No. Did you contact Mr. Baxter to discuss access? We did not think we needed to. We believed it was a public road. But you did not confirm that belief with any legal professional before spending $80,000 on construction. She glared at him. We had a permit from the county. Marcus pulled out a document. A permit that was issued based on incorrect information that your HOA provided. The county has since revoked that permit after reviewing the corrected property records. You knew, or should have known, that the road was private property. The trial lasted 3 days. On the final day, Judge Morrison delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find that the property in question, including the road, is privately owned by Adam Baxter. There is no public easement, and the Meadowbrook Pines HOA had no legal right to use the road or conduct construction on Mr. Baxter's land. The HOA is ordered to pay Mr. Baxter for damages to his property, as well as legal fees. The countersuit filed by the HOA is dismissed with prejudice. The courtroom erupted. Patricia stood up, shouting something about appealing, but Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Mrs. Cunningham, if you disrupt my courtroom again, I will hold you in contempt. Marcus and I walked out, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was finally over. Or so I thought. A week later, I received a check from the HOA for $17,000, covering the damages and legal fees. I also got a letter from Patricia, typed on HOA letterhead, informing me that the Meadowbrook Pines Board had voted to appeal the decision. I called Marcus immediately. Can they do this? He sighed. They can file an appeal, but it is unlikely to succeed. Judge Morrison's ruling was based on clear evidence. An appeals court is not going to overturn it unless there was a legal error, which there was not. The appeal dragged on for months. The HOA hired a new lawyer, a high-priced firm from Missoula, and they filed motion after motion, trying to find any angle to challenge the ruling. Marcus handled it all, and every time, the appeals court sided with us. Finally, in December, the Montana Supreme Court declined to hear the case, effectively ending the legal battle. The HOA's appeal was denied, and the original ruling stood. I thought that would be the end of Patricia Cunningham and her crusade, but she had one more move left. In early January 2026, I received a notice that the Meadowbrook Pines HOA was suing me again, this time claiming that my gate was a public nuisance because it blocked access to the lake during emergencies. Marcus was livid. This is harassment. They are filing frivolous lawsuits to drain your resources. I am going to file a motion for sanctions. The case went before Judge Morrison again, and this time, she was not having it. Mrs. Cunningham, this is the third time you have brought a case against Mr. Baxter regarding the same property dispute. The matter has been settled. Continuing to file lawsuits is an abuse of the court system. I am sanctioning the Meadowbrook Pines HOA $20,000 to be paid to Mr. Baxter, and I am issuing a permanent injunction barring the HOA from filing any further claims related to this property without first obtaining permission from this court. You understand? Patricia's new lawyer nodded quickly. Yes, Your Honor, but Patricia could not help herself. She stood up. Your Honor, this is outrageous. We are simply trying to protect our community. Judge Morrison's expression went cold. Mrs. Cunningham, you are in contempt of court. Bailiff, take her into custody. The courtroom went silent as the bailiff walked over and placed handcuffs on Patricia. She looked stunned, as if she could not believe this was happening. You cannot do this. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, Judge Morrison said. I suggest you exercise it. You will spend the next 48 hours in the county jail, and perhaps that will give you time to reflect on the consequences of your actions. Patricia was led out of the courtroom, and I sat there, almost unable to believe what I had just witnessed. Marcus leaned over. I have never seen a judge do that in a civil case. She must have really pushed the limits. After Patricia was released from jail, the Meadowbrook Pines HOA held an emergency board meeting. According to Carl, who heard about it from a friend who lived in the development, the meeting was contentious. Many residents were furious that Patricia's actions had cost the HOA tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, sanctions, and damages. They voted to remove her as president and dissolve the board, replacing it with a new group of leaders. The new HOA president, a reasonable man named Tom Fairfield, reached out to me in February. We met at a coffee shop in Whitefish, and he apologized for everything that had happened. Mr. Baxter, I want you to know that the new board does not support what Patricia did. She acted recklessly and damaged relationships with our neighbors. We are committed to moving forward in a positive way. I appreciated the sentiment. I do not have a problem with your community, Tom. I just want to be left alone to enjoy my property in peace. He nodded. That is completely reasonable. If there is ever anything we can do to be better neighbors, please let us know. We shook hands and I left feeling like maybe, finally, this was truly over. But there was still one more surprise waiting for me. In March, I received a call from Officer Martinez. Mr. Baxter, I wanted to give you a heads up. We have been investigating Patricia Cunningham for additional charges related to the construction project on your property. It turns out she misappropriated HOA funds to pay for the work without proper board approval. The new board filed a complaint, and we have charged her with embezzlement and fraud. I was stunned. How much are we talking about? Over $100,000. She funneled money from the HOA's reserve fund into the lake project without authorization. She also falsified invoices to cover it up. This is a felony. The case went to trial in May 2026. I attended, curious to see how it would all play out. Patricia's defense was that she had acted in the best interest of the community, and that the board had given her implicit approval. The prosecution tore that argument apart, presenting bank records, emails, and testimony from board members who had no idea what Patricia was doing. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Patricia was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to the HOA. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a sense of closure. The woman who had turned my life upside down was finally being held accountable for her actions. I spent the rest of May and June repairing the damage to my property. I hired a crew to regrade the road, replant the cleared brush, and restore the land to the way it had been before the HOA's construction project. It was expensive, but the sanctions and damages I had been awarded covered most of it. By July, the property looked almost like it had before Patricia Cunningham had ever set foot on it. The steel gate remained, a permanent reminder of the battle I had fought to protect my land. I also installed a second gate at the far end of the property, near the lake, just to make sure no one could access it from the other side. One evening in late July, I drove out to the property with a cooler full of beer and my fishing gear. I parked near the lake, set up my chair, and cast my line into the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the only sounds were the gentle lapping of the water and the occasional call of a bird. For the first time in over a year, I felt at peace. The legal battles were over. Patricia was in prison and my property was secure. I had fought for what was mine, and I had won. As I sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about my grandfather and the legacy he had left me. He had bought this land to create a sanctuary, a place where his family could find peace and solitude. Patricia and her HOA had tried to take that away, but they had failed. I cracked open a beer and raised it toward the sky. This one is for you, Grandpa. You taught me to stand up for what is right, no matter how hard it gets. I hope I made you proud. The lake was silent, but in that silence I felt his presence. He would have been proud. And that was all that mattered. The months that followed were blissfully quiet. The new Meadowbrook Pines HOA board kept their distance, and I never heard from Patricia again. Occasionally, I would see Tom Fairfield at the grocery store or the hardware shop in Whitefish, and we would exchange polite nods. The tension that had defined the relationship between me and the HOA was gone, replaced by a mutual respect for boundaries. I also started spending more time on the property. I built a small cabin near the lake, just a one-room structure with a wood stove and a porch overlooking the water. It became my weekend retreat, a place where I could escape the demands of running my construction business and reconnect with the land. Carl Jensen became a good friend. He would stop by occasionally, and we would fish together or share a meal. He told me stories about the area, about the old-timers who had homesteaded in the mountains and the history of the land. It gave me a deeper appreciation for the place and a stronger sense of connection to my grandfather's legacy. In September, Marcus called with some unexpected news. Adam, the Montana Supreme Court is using your case as a precedent for a ruling on property rights. They cited Judge Morrison's decision in a case involving a similar dispute over private roads. Your fight is helping other landowners protect their property. I felt a swell of pride. What had started as a personal battle to protect my land had become something bigger, a statement about the importance of property rights and the need to stand up against overreach, whether from an HOA or any other entity. As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The stress, the legal battles, the confrontations with Patricia, it had all been worth it. I had protected my grandfather's legacy and ensured that future generations of my family would have a place to call their own. On New Year's Eve, I drove out to the property one last time before the new year. The weather was cold and snow covered the ground, but the lake was peaceful, its surface frozen and glistening in the moonlight. I stood at the water's edge, bundled in a heavy coat, and looked out at the expanse of land that stretched before me. This was my sanctuary, my refuge, my home. And no one, not Patricia Cunningham, not the HOA, not anyone, could ever take that away from me. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the lake, the moonlight reflecting off the ice. I sent it to Marcus with a simple message: "Thank you for everything." His reply came a few minutes later: "You fought the good fight, Adam. Enjoy your peace. You earned it." I smiled and put my phone away. The steel gate at the entrance to my property stood as a symbol of that fight, a barrier between the world and my private sanctuary. It was more than just a gate, it was a declaration of independence, a statement that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the land, for the legal system that had upheld my rights, for the friends and allies who had supported me, and for the lessons my grandfather had taught me about the value of perseverance and principle. The battle with the Meadowbrook Pines HOA had tested me in ways I had never imagined, but it had also shown me what I was capable of when pushed to the limit. I had stood my ground, fought back against injustice, and protected what was mine, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The gate remained locked, the deed was secure, and the lake was mine. Patricia Cunningham was behind bars. The HOA had learned a hard lesson about respecting property rights, and I was free to enjoy my land in peace. As I crossed into the new year, I made a promise to myself. I would never take this peace for granted. I would cherish the land, honor my grandfather's memory, and ensure that this sanctuary remained a place of refuge for generations to come. The fight was over, but the legacy would endure. And that, more than any legal victory, was the true measure of success. The spring of 2026 brought new life to the property. Wildflowers bloomed along the road, and the trees that had been damaged during the construction were beginning to recover. I spent weekends working on the cabin, adding a small deck and planting a garden. It was therapeutic, working with my hands and watching the land heal. In April, I received a letter from the Meadowbrook Pines HOA. For a moment, my heart sank, fearing another legal challenge. But when I opened it, I found an invitation to a community barbecue. The new board wanted to extend an olive branch and foster better relationships with neighbors. I debated whether to go. Part of me wanted nothing to do with the HOA after everything that had happened. But I also recognized that the new board was not responsible for Patricia's actions, and they were making an effort to move forward. I decided to attend. The barbecue was held at the Meadowbrook Pines Community Center, a modest building near the entrance to the development. When I arrived, Tom Fairfield greeted me warmly and introduced me to the other board members. They were friendly and respectful, and I could tell they were genuinely trying to rebuild trust. Over burgers and beers, I talked with several residents. Many of them apologized for the way things had been handled and expressed frustration with Patricia's leadership. One woman, a retired teacher named Linda, told me, "We had no idea what she was doing with the HOA funds. She kept everything close to the vest. When we found out she had been lying to us, we were furious. It was a reminder that Patricia's actions had hurt not just me, but the entire community. The residents of Meadowbrook Pines had been victims too, manipulated by a leader who had put her own agenda above the needs and interests of the people she was supposed to represent. As the evening went on, I found myself enjoying the company. These were good people, just trying to build a life in a beautiful part of Montana. The tension and animosity that had defined our relationship for so long began to fade, replaced by a cautious but genuine sense of goodwill. Before I left, Tom pulled me aside. "Adam, I just want to say thank you for giving us a chance. I know it was not easy for you to come here today. We are committed to being good neighbors, and if there is ever anything we can do, please let us know." I shook his hand. "I appreciate that, Tom. Let us just move forward and leave the past where it belongs." As I drove home, I felt lighter. The battle with the HOA had consumed so much of my energy and attention, but now it was truly behind me. The gate would remain, a practical reminder of the importance of boundaries, but the emotional weight of the conflict was finally lifting. The summer was one of the best I could remember. I spent long weekends at the cabin, fishing in the lake and hiking the trails that wound through the property. Carl joined me often, and we developed a routine of Friday evening fish fries and Saturday morning hikes. One afternoon in late June, as Carl and I were sitting on the cabin porch, he said, "You know, Adam, what you did was important, not just for you but for all of us out here. Property rights mean something, and you stood up for that when it would have been easier to just give in." I looked out at the lake, thinking about his words. "I did not do it to make a statement, Carl. I did it because it was the right thing to do. My grandfather worked hard to buy this land and protect it. I was not going to let someone take it from him, even after he was gone." Carl nodded. "That is exactly why it matters. You honored his memory and set an example for the rest of us. That takes courage." The conversation stayed with me. I had never thought of myself as particularly courageous. I was just a guy trying to protect what was his. But maybe that was what courage was, standing up for what you believed in, even when it was hard, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. In August, I got a call from Officer Martinez. "Mr. Baxter, I wanted to let you know that Patricia Cunningham was denied parole. She will serve her full sentence." I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved that she would not be released early, but another part of me felt a strange sense of sadness. Patricia had brought so much of this on herself, but I could not help but wonder what had driven her to such extremes. Was it ego, desperation to leave a legacy, a misguided sense of righteousness? I would never know, and perhaps it did not matter. What mattered was that justice had been served, and the people she had harmed, myself included, could move on with their lives. The fall brought cooler weather and a quiet beauty to the property. The leaves turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the lake reflected the changing landscape like a mirror. I spent hours sitting on the cabin porch, drinking coffee and watching the world transform around me. In October, Marcus called with more good news. "Adam, I just got word that the HOA's insurance company has agreed to pay an additional settlement for the emotional distress and damage caused by Patricia's actions. They are offering $50,000. It is completely voluntary on their part, but I think it is a gesture of goodwill." I was surprised. I was not expecting that. Marcus chuckled. "Neither was I, but take it. You have earned it, and it is a sign that the new HOA board is serious about making things right." I accepted the settlement, and I used the money to fund a scholarship at the local high school in my grandfather's name. It was a way to honor his memory and give back to the community that had supported me through the legal battle. As 2026 came to a close, I found myself looking back on the journey with a sense of gratitude. The fight with the Meadowbrook Pines HOA had been one of the hardest challenges of my life, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, integrity, and the importance of standing up for what you believe in. The steel gate still stood at the entrance to my property, a physical barrier that kept the world at bay. But it was also a symbol of something deeper, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, that boundaries matter, and that the past can shape but not dictate the future. My grandfather had bought this land with the dream of creating a sanctuary, a place where his family could find peace and solitude. Patricia Cunningham had tried to take that dream away, but she had failed. The land was still mine, the lake was still pristine, and the cabin stood as a testament to the enduring power of family, legacy, and the will to protect what is rightfully yours. As I stood at the lake on a cold December evening, watching the first snow of the season fall gently on the water, I felt a profound sense of contentment. The battle was over, the gate was secure, and the deed was mine. The sanctuary my grandfather had envisioned was safe, not just for me, but for the generations that would come after me. I raised my cup of coffee toward the sky, a silent toast to the man who had made it all possible. Thank you, Grandpa. For the land, for the lessons, and for the courage to fight when it mattered most. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, and I turned and walked back to the cabin. The fire was burning inside, the wood stove crackling with warmth, and for the first time in a long time I felt truly at home. The gate would remain locked, the boundaries would be respected, and the land would be protected. That was my promise to my grandfather, to myself, and to the future. And it was a promise I intended to keep, no matter what.